Oh my goodness, are we going way back? My job at Def Jam Recordings, I'll give you just a little prelude before Def Jam. I was a PR person at CBS News, Network News, New York City. And I had the great fortune of working with wonderful journalists like Dan Rather, the late Charles Kuralt, the late Ed Bradley from 60 Minutes, the incredible Leslie Stahl. I worked with all these people. They were just wonderful, wonderful people to work with. And I learned so much. But the thing about news, and I'm a news junkie still to this day, is the way we pitched our shows, our correspondence to the press, the way we handled interviews for our various talent was pretty much a template, and you followed it consistently. Even on a special event, and by special events in the news division, I mean we did the Democratic National Conventions, all the primaries, the opening of the Statue of Liberty after its restoration, Vladimir Horowitz in Russia when he returned to Russia. And yes, those are exciting, exciting things, but still it's very cookie cutter way of doing these things. So even with all the great opportunities that came that our way or within our office of press at CBS News, it got to be a little boring for me. And I have a creative mind. And for those of you who have creative minds, then you have to follow that dream. And I was very fortunate while I was at CBS News, and it was someone who worked with Meredith Vieira actually, came to me and she said, I know that you want to move on to something exciting. I heard that there's a position at Def Jam Recordings in PR. And I was like, no way, because I had just read this big article about Russell Simmons. He was on the cover of some magazine. And I was like, get out of here. So I promptly went and I submitted my resume to Def Jam Recordings. And guess what? They hired me as the director of publicity. And I could not believe it. I was floored. But I will tell you, my biggest strength, the reason why they hired me was because I had excellent writing skills. And at the time, no one else in that company at Def Jam had that kind of credential. It was the beginning of hip hop when I was there. And I got to be a part of history making in the world of hip hop. So my artists were LL Cool J, who I know so many of you still know these days because he's on TV. I think NCIS LA or something like that on CBS. And Public Enemy. Certainly, you know Flavor Flav. Actually, Flavor and I got to be so close that I'm godmother to one of his children and moved him into the building I lived in. And we became this big family. Really weird, right? And then EPMD and Nice and Smooth and Third Base. Now, some of you may not remember all of these names, but they were a part of what hip-hop became. And additionally, the office I worked in for Def Jam, there was not enough room for me because the offices were small at that time for Def Jam Recordings. So they put me in the office of Rush Management, which was Russell Simmons' management side of his business. And he managed a lot of artists like the Fresh Prince, who now you know as Will Smith. And all those guys were constantly in and out of my office because that was the management office. So Big Daddy Kane and Tribe Called Quest. All you guys know Q-Tip. He's still around hanging out with Leonardo DiCaprio. De La Soul. All of those guys were always sitting in my office, hanging around. Needless to say, I got very little work done. But it was really fun kicking it with them and having great conversations. So, but Russell Simmons also had 8 record labels. I can't even begin to tell you. And there were 2 publicists. I was one of them, and I had an assistant. And it was a job that could not be done effectively. With so much. He grew so fast, but we didn't grow staff-wise to make sure we covered all of that. And it was quite overwhelming. And it got to the point where, I've experienced burnout. And that happens. And that happens in any genre that you can end up working in. And you have to learn how to pace yourself. You have to realize what your limitations are. And you have to be able to have the courage to speak up and say, I need help. Okay, so, but it was an experience. It was real. I got to tell you, lots of trips out to LA and, the Grammys and the Soul Train Music Awards and those types of things. The BET thing hadn't been invented back then by that, or created at that time. But there were so many other, and yes, there were red carpets and there were the parties. But in terms of the job, it was just a great stepping stone. It was a great learning experience. It strengthened my writing. It connected me to the journalists that I really, really needed to know. And it helped me to advance for future, for my future, that I still use what I learned from back those many years ago today in my own business.